A very popular video channel on social media is owned by a young man named Daniel Mack. He's made a name for himself when he walks up to rich people who are driving really beautiful, luxurious sports cars. And he stops them and he says, "Excuse me, that's an expensive car. What do you do for a living?" There's the middle-aged woman with the Lamborghini Huracan worth $280,000. She says she's in real estate. There's the young man in the chartreuse Porsche 911S. Sells for $203,500. He says he's a music producer for adult videos. Then there's the bearded man in the $208,000 Audi R8 who says he does roofing. And then there are the two young college students, sisters. They're in a Ferrari 488 worth $280,000, and they admit that their daddy bought them the car. These vehicles are gorgeous. These people are handsome. They're beautiful. And the primary emotion they evoke as you see these beautiful cars and people is envy. On June 6, 1944, a young black medic named Waverly Woodson was aboard a landing craft approaching Omaha Beach when the craft hit a submerged mine. While wounded by shrapnel in the thigh and in the groin, Waverly Woodson knew that he had a job to do. And so he scrambled across that hostile beach. It was being raped by machine gun fire and artillery blasts. And Waverly Woodson found shelter and set up a first aid station. Continually under fire, he treated the mounting number of wounded men, white and black, for more than a day without rest, all while wounded himself. He pulled out bullets, he patched gaping wounds, he amputated limbs, he dispensed blood plasma, and he even resuscitated 4 drowning men. 30 hours after he set his boots on Omaha Beach, Waverly Woodson collapsed and he was hospitalized. But after only 3 days in convalescence, Woodson requested that he return to his unit and get back to work. All in all, he is credited with saving that day over 200 lives. After the war, Waverly Woodson would go and get a medical degree, and he worked at the National Naval Medical Center, worked then at the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, and though it took several decades, Woodson finally received the Medal of Honor, which of course is the highest, most distinguished award a soldier can get. His service, his dedication, his commitment to helping others mean that the primary emotion we may walk away with is admiration. So our first story is about envy. Our second one about admiration. And the title and question of this morning's sermon is this: would you rather be envied or admired? Let's think about envy. Celebrities, billionaires, fashion models, those with comfortable, charmed, pampered, and well-known lives. And then let's think about Abraham Lincoln, Mother Teresa, Helen Keller, Vincent van Gogh, those whose hardships few of us would want, but who accomplish incredible things for humanity. I envy someone for their good looks, their possessions, the ease and comfort of their lives. I admire someone who cares for an ailing spouse, is exceedingly patient with their toddler, and regularly springs to the aid of someone in need, putting their own wants and comforts to the side. And there's a clear preference Jesus has for you and me this morning, folks. We're unpacking it here in this morning's gospel. Live the life that is admired. Develop empathy, generosity, and kindness. Help the lowly, help the lonely, help the vulnerable. Focus our eyes on those who have little. Set our goals on helping all we can. As we look at today's gospel, it's essentially an advice parable about going to a wedding banquet and not angling for the head table, but for the lowest table, as those who exalt themselves shall be humbled, and those who humble themselves shall be exalted. We're in the middle of Luke's gospel. Jesus is giving advice on discipleship. It's as if he's asking you and me this morning, what kind of people do you want to be? Here's the kind of people I'm trying to make. Here's the kind of people I'm looking for. And here's how you will be happiest, most fulfilled, and do the most good in this big world with your little life. Many of us are here in church this morning, consciously or unconsciously, looking for fulfillment. It's a part of us that's unsettled. It's a part of us that's discontented. This is the cause of much of our anger, of much of our frustration, of many of our fears. We're worried about our fulfillment. Will our kids or grandkids be all right, as if they were ever ours and not God's anyway? Will our careers turn out as we want them to be? Will we assemble the right constellation of possessions and experiences that we long for? Will our world be free of disease, division, and major upheaval, as if anyone who's ever lived for any length of time can claim that? And Jesus is here to help us maneuver the challenges of our lives with savvy practicality, keeping our well-being and the well-being of others paramount, suggesting that our solution is to shun the temptation to live envied lives and to more intentionally seek lives that are admired. Would you rather be envied or admired? And we get 3 lessons from Jesus in this advice parable that I'm going to talk about. Those 3 lessons is that Jesus tells us where we shouldn't go. Jesus tells us where we should go. And Jesus tells us who will take us there. Some of us may know that Adolf Hitler suffered from digestive and intestinal problems for much of his life, pretty serious ones. This made him a strict vegetarian, and he was under the care of a doctor many people considered a quack, who routinely gave Hitler medication that may have actually been poisoning him. As a result of his condition, of his diet, of much of that diet being beans and other legumes, plus that medication, Hitler had a real problem with farting. That's what it sounded like. That's right, at times uncontrollably. Some people behind his back did not call him Der Führer, which is your leader. They called him Der Furzer, which means the farter. Sitting at the head table at the place of honor at Nazi banquets then was no fun for visiting heads of state, who privately complained about the smell. And for the others gathered there, the other Third Reich members, who, as we know, came up with odious plans of their own. When Jesus begins this parable talking about sitting at the head table, these places of honor, the assumption is that these are the seats who are taken by those prizing earthly attention and notoriety, those angling for earthly power, that these people want to be seen. These people want to be envied. These people want to make deals with and gain from others earthly power, earthly prestige, earthly status. We notice that Jesus does not ban people from sitting in places of honor, but he certainly suggests that we should not make this our pursuit, our main pursuit, our default setting, or our ultimate goal. Which perhaps prods you and I to ask, what are the places of honor in our lives? Are they titles, awards, or positions that we seek with motives that perhaps we might question? What do we envy, and how does that envy affect us? Envy is defined as an emotion. It's an emotion that occurs when a person lacks somebody else's superior quality, achievement, or possession, and either desires it or wishes that the other person didn't have it. Aristotle called envy pain at the sight of another's good fortune, stirred by those who have what we ought to have. And so Jesus' first piece of advice is for you and me to avoid putting ourselves in those high places, those places of envy, and to seek another place. What might that place of envy be for you? Is it an Instagram feed? Is it a book or set of magazines that you read? Are they people whose lives you put yourself in front of? Jesus desires for us to seek another place. The great Roman Catholic social reformer Dorothy Day once commented on the early church. This is a wonderful line. This is what she called the early church. That place where faith was a bright fire that warmed more than those who kept it burning. The early church, that place where faith was a bright fire that warmed more than those who kept it burning. And she talked about a particular custom in the early church that you may be familiar with. That custom was this, that every Christian family, they kept a room ready in their house for any stranger who might come by asking for shelter. They even called it the stranger's room. And it was used by those who could afford no other accommodation, usually the poor, usually the destitute. These early believers kept the stranger's room open, not because meeting strangers might be fun. Maybe some of you have done Airbnb and they say, oh, meet all these strangers who come here. They didn't do this because housing strangers reminded them of what Christ might do. But they did it for the plain, simple, and stupendous fact that they believed that in housing a stranger, they were housing Jesus. So when we take our seats in the lower places, it can also be seen as Jesus' invitation for us to sit with him. Taking this seat puts us with people Jesus preferred, whom he spent time with, the most time with, and commends us to be with. Sitting here puts us in touch with the needs, with the concerns, with the worries of those who are struggling most. This is the benefit of having an in-house food pantry here at St. David's. I look at how do we make our house a place that has a stranger's room? Well, we open up that pantry. Mike oversees 3 days a week. Many of you volunteer for it. Almost all of you give to. There's the benefit of a movable shelter, hosting the South Oakland shelter, as we will hopefully be back to doing the sit-in. And this is the benefit also of hosting our annual Christmas Day feast, which we're planning again this Christmas Day, December 25th. And it asks us bigger questions about how you and I order our lives. Lives not of envy, but of admiration. What's the lowest place in your life? What's that mean? How are we avoiding it? How are we seeking after it? So Jesus' first piece of advice is to avoid the higher places. His second is to seek out the lower places. And his third piece of advice is to pay attention to the host. In 2005, the gifted writer named David Foster Wallace gave one of the most memorable commencement addresses ever. He told a crowd of Kenyan college students not to be taken in by the false belief in atheism, that there's no such thing as not worshiping. In his words, everybody worships. The only choice we get is what we worship. And the compelling reason for maybe choosing some sort of God or spiritual type of thing to worship, be it Jesus or Allah or Yahweh or some inviolable set of ethical principles, is that pretty much anything else you worship will eat you alive. If you worship money and things, if they are where you tap real meaning in life, then you'll never have enough. You will never feel like you have enough. Worship your body, worship beauty and sexual allure, and you will always feel ugly. And when time and age start showing, you will die a million deaths before they finally leave you. On one level, we all know this stuff already. It's been codified in scripture, as myths, as proverbs, as cliches, as epigrams and parables, the skeleton of every great story. The whole trick is keeping the truth up front in daily consciousness. And that truth, my friends, is that someone, some force, some entity loves you, is guiding you, is present with you at every moment. Jesus was very clear about his eternal presence with you and me. He stated frequently that he would be with us to guide and provide, to care and protect. And as you and I take our seats at that banquet, following his advice to pay attention to the last and to the least, that we take our exaltation and our success out of our own hands, and we let the host exalt us, not ourselves. God is at work in our lives in more ways than we'll ever know. You know, I always consider it a bonus when I say something that touches somebody, send me a note or write and say something. But I'm convinced that in your life and in mine, the vast majority of times that you say something that makes somebody's day or that inspires them doesn't hit them till a little while later, and they never let them know. So we walk through thinking, I didn't make any impact on the world today. When the reality is, your presence has touched more people than you will ever know. A famous atomic scientist was asked one day by his wife as he came home working on a very important project, "What's the most important thing you did?" He said, "Well, I told my elderly secretary that her dress was pretty." And it made such an impression that it meant more than all the important work he was doing that day. Don't seek your own advancement, but allow others to see your goodness and to reward you. Seek your own contentment and conviction in yourself and in your sense of calling, so that moving to a higher spot, which is totally out of our control anyway, is simply frosting on the cake. Come ready to learn, not to teach. Come eager to listen, not to preach. Come open to change, not poised to convert. Jesus' first piece of advice is to avoid those higher places. His second piece of advice is to seek those lower places. And his third piece of advice is to pay attention to the host. How is God talking to you most recently? What has God said to you? What God moments have we had? What are they saying to us? And what can we do this week to make more room for God's voice? How is God urging us to let go and to allow the divine to guide us? How can we hang on to life a little more loosely this week? You know, when I was growing up as a kid, we would go to Tigers games. My big dream was to catch a baseball in the stands. Well, a year ago in Philadelphia, that came true for a 10-year-old named Aaron Presley. He was sitting in the bleachers. It was during a Phillies-Cubs game in Philadelphia when a foul ball made it stands, jostling fans, elbowing each other. You've all seen it happen. But it was Presley who finally came down with the ball, smiling with glee as he held it up for those TV cameras from ear to ear. But not everybody was happy with Aaron's prize. Sitting not far from Presley was 7-year-old Emma Brady, and she collapsed in tears on her mother's lap, having had no chance to grab the ball, compared to Presley and all the other big kids and adults who were jostling for position. That's when Aaron Presley noticed that sobbing little girl. Aaron Presley, the most envied person in the ballpark, the kid who just came up with a foul ball. Well, he instantly went from being the most envied, the most admired, as he made his way over to Emma Brady's seat and gave her the baseball. Aaron may no longer have that baseball, which one day may have found itself at the bottom of a junk drawer, maybe in a garage sale. But he will forever have that memory and that moment of bringing unimaginable delight to a little life, and in himself build a character of service to others that will make a mark on his own soul and on the world. Friends, let us not seek to be envied. Let us seek to be admired, and let us go and do likewise. Amen.